This is the second of our talks on Freud's dream theory. Today we're going to focus a little bit on the topic of the wish. I stressed several times before that for Freud at least, the motor force for a dream is a kind of wanting, a kind of wishing, a kind of needing. And I also suggested that the most primary way of responding to this wanting, frustrated, wishing, needing is for human beings to image the thing. This is the kind of basic primary way of responding to need, to lack. And Freud thinks that this type of thinking, we could even call it that, this kind of way of engaging with the world is primary. It's there in infantile development, but it's also retained in subsequent adult life, and we go back to it. We, as it were, regress to it every night when we are dreaming. We have a stream of images, wishes, wants. Now the question, funnily enough, it comes quite late in Freud's famous interpretation of dreams. The question we could ask, well, whose wish are we dealing with? And of course, everything I've said so far makes us think, well, it's going to be my wish. But Freud says, yeah, it's your wish, but let's not be naive about the complications of psychological life. What you wish for is very often some kind of negotiation what you think other people also wish for. If you've been following my Lacan lectures, we know that, certainly for Lacan, desire is always the other's desire. So a wish, what I want, is often a complicated, problematic thing. This is one of those moments when fairy tales help us, I think. You could say any number of Disney films, situations when I'm confronted with the situation and I've got two small kids, they're always kind of playing this game. You have 3 wishes. What wish would you like? Whether it's the genie that comes out of the lamp in Aladdin, many different fairy tale situations, this situation happens. And of course, there's this childish fascination and happiness and allure. Wow, I get 3 wishes. But then you kind of got to do it quickly. So you say, my first wish is, I want $1 million. And then, oh, damn, I should have had 2. Oh, no, next thing I've used up my 2 wishes. Oh, my third wish will be to have all the money in the world. Until you realize that having all the money in the world kind of devalues the whole idea of money. So without belaboring the point, we can find many examples in fairy tales where the process of wishing, what I want, is not always that clear, and it entails the possibility of making myself more unhappy what I wish for. There's more frustration in it. Another point we can make about the processes of wishing is that not only is it conflicted and difficult, but it's also informed by what we think other people want. So in a way, it's not just our wishes. It's a kind of overdetermined situation where we also draw on wishes of others. But the further complication to wishes, and again, you can hear kind of Freud in the wings going, don't be naive about human psychology. It's not that straightforward. The further complicating factor here is I can wish for things I don't want. Whoa, hold on. You're wishing for things you don't want? Well, let's think about human psychology. Human beings like going to horror movies, well, at least some of them. They like doing things like doing bungee jumps. They like extreme sports. Okay, maybe this doesn't pertain to you, but presumably to you also there will be some area where there's some kind of conflict whereby I wish for something that thrills me, that stresses me, that maybe causes me some anxiety. In other words, you can also wish for things that might terrify you. Why all this exposition? Why all this discussion? Because it's important to ask or be aware of the complexity of wishes. Because otherwise we have this situation where people just kind of naively suggest this thing, well, I thought about the dream, you gave me a dream for my homework exercise, and it was a frightening dream. In fact, it was a nightmare. I don't see a wish there. Oh, says Freud, okay, let's think about this. Maybe it's not an obvious wish, but presumably, Freud will argue, there's some wantfulness, there's some wishfulness that informs the dream and sets it in motion. Think about the child who's not got the meal that they need, something like that. Now, again, you may still refute this, the famous wish fulfillment thesis of dreaming. That's okay, you can refute it if you wish, but if you wish, nice. You can refute it, but let's at least make sure we understand the complexity of what Freud's position is. And here it is. The wish that seems to be the motive force for a dream is often a disguised wish, and it's often a suppressed wish. It can be a conflictual wish. It can be someone else's wish. It can be a wish you had when you were much, much younger, says Freud. He thinks that the unconscious doesn't have time in the way that we have a chronological time where one period's over and another period begins. He thinks that if you wished for something many years ago, it can still be a wish, a motor force in your dreams. And trust me, this seems to be true in my dreams. I still sometimes dream about finding that precious comic book that I wish I could have found many years ago. Embarrassing revelation, but there it is. So if we're going to take Freud's wish fulfillment seriously, and his wish fulfillment idea is that every dream has a wish somewhere within it, then we should make sure that we at least grasp what he's trying to say and what the complexity of those wishes might be. He'll also give some examples where someone says to him, they come to his clinic and they say, Sigmund, I don't agree with you. You say every dream has a wish. No, it's not true. I had a dream. My sister was lying on her deathbed. She died. We had a funeral. How terrible. How could you say there's a wish? So Freud does his thing and he says, well, tell me what happened at the funeral. And she says, wow, lots of people. Oh, yeah, I saw this other man I haven't seen for a long time. Freud's eyebrows go up. Yes, tell me about the man. Oh, yes, he's a very nice man. My family would not let me socialize with him, but I've always kind of liked him. In fact, I love him. So Freud says, well, okay, maybe that's the wish that your dream is staging, even though you need some traumatic, horrible thing for the wish to be manifest at some level. Okay, I think we've said enough about wishes. We've tried to emphasize that they're complex, that they're contradictory, that they can be, at the most initial first appearance, not what we wished for. But there's something about the wantingness of human subjectivity that motivates dreams for Freud. I've mentioned all of this because what he's suggesting is not just that dreams are motivated by wishes, by wants, but also that those wishes and wants are sometimes problematizing to us. In other words, they're not necessarily something that one could easily just picture in our day-to-day life because they might trouble us. They might trouble us for any number of reasons. Now again, this is something you might want to refute about Freud's theory, but the reason I'm making this lengthy discussion, this digression, is to say that for Freud, a very crucial element of dreams are these four elements of these operations, these disguises, and they need to disguise content. They need to rearrange the content. They need to find substitutions because some of the thoughts that go through my head on a daily basis aren't thoughts that I would want to own up to. Now, this is also one of those moments when I think psychoanalysis is doing something important, even though people like to deny this idea. Sometimes I scandalize students and say, in the last week, you've wished you could kill someone. And everyone's, oh no, we would never do that. Of course not. Oh, this is terrible. How could you say such a thing? Now, I don't mean that in your conscious mind, you did any kind of deliberate thing and I want to kill someone. But I'm guessing that there's been moments, maybe within the last week, where someone cut you off in traffic, someone said something to you, and in your mind you thought, beep, 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 beep. In other words, some bad thought, which almost immediately you distance yourself from, try to forget. Freud's model of the mind is one which suggests that there's a whole lot of things that stream through it, that flow through it, phrases, unpalatable ideas that you may have heard, you may have seen in a film, you may have heard other people say, that in a situation, as it were, think themselves in your head, even though you may not want to own them as such. The whole process for him of psychotherapy in the constraints of a civilized world is that people have a lot of those thoughts, have a lot of those impulses, a lot of those wishes, which they almost immediately separate and often want to locate, project onto other people. Freud's model of psychological health for people who are constantly doing that is in a way suggesting maybe it would be useful to be able to come a little closer to some of those ideas. Back again then to dreams, you could say one of the therapeutic aspects of Freud's approach to the interpretation of dreams is to ask the question, what is it that maybe you desire? What is it that maybe you are wishing for? What is it that is being played out in your unconscious that you're not quite aware of? And the idea is not to say, bam, interpret it, got it, this is what you, bad boy, have been thinking about all along. It's rather simply to be able to get a sense of what might be being played out. What might be those thoughts that you don't know you're having, the thoughts that are being had, so to speak, in your own mind, the wishes that you don't know you're wishing for. And if one can access a little bit of that, the idea is that you will have greater freedom in your everyday psychological life. So it's not about like a pinning of a crime, of a guilty verdict on someone who had a thought. This is the kind of bad caricature of the psychoanalytic process. It's more about being able to have some facility, some awareness, some basic sensibility of the thoughts you may have thought, the wishes you may have thought you didn't have, that in fact you do. Okay, so Freud wants to approach dreams in a way as a series of disguises, as a way of treatments. And as I've tried to do, if we shift to a more Lacanian orientation, we'll say that those processes are also apparent in how language works. So we'll start to deal with that. But as we draw this part of the lectures to a close, let me give you one crucial Freudian distinction. Freud's going to say that what you present, my homework exercise to you last time was to think of a dream, to write it down. Wonderful material, very valuable material. Dreams often surprise us. They come up with material that we didn't even necessarily, sometimes we couldn't even imagine that we would dream that thing in all its vivacity, in all its vividness, in all its creativity, sometimes in the memory capacity of dreams. One can be surprised by the creativity of one's own dreams. Nevertheless, I asked you to write down a dream, and here's the distinction I want to introduce, and I'll follow it up with another homework exercise. For Freud, you have manifest and latent content. Manifest content and latent content. What is the difference? The dream that you wrote down, or if you go on to write down a dream that you might bring to a therapist, you might bring to analysis, or that you've written down, this is the manifest content. Manifest, it's there. It's how the dream, as you remember it, as you speak it. In addition to that, Freud would suggest that there's a whole series of ideas that are underlying that manifest content. That's the latent content of the dream. We introduced briefly before the idea of the dream work. Remember, the dream work alone is the essence of dreaming. The dream work is the thing that does that mediation, that does that translation. The dream work, which we can break down into these 4 operations, is what happens to the latent thoughts, the latent unconscious thoughts. It translates them, it treats them, it edits them, it transforms them, and it turns them into the manifest content of your dream. So when one starts the work of a dream interpretation, in a way, one has to undo the dream work, says Freud. He says you have a dream, but it needs to be interpreted. The dream, in a way, is made not to be understandable. It feels jumbled up. It feels like the meaning's not clear. It feels puzzling. It's, after all, just a dream. That is exactly, for Freud, the success of the dream work. It's taken some thoughts, some unconscious thoughts, some thoughts that are percolating around the back of one's mind, and it's turned them into the manifest content of the dream. So in a way, we often are in awe, fascinated about the manifest contents of our dream, and we want to tell people about them. We want to go to analysis, and we're amazed and stupefied sometimes by the content of our dreams. Freud's saying, okay, good, you're at least talking about it. You're not just completely dismissing it, but we need to go a step further. Rather than being fascinated in awe of the manifest content of the dream, let's see if maybe there's been substitutions there. Let's see if in that content there's some other possibility of meaning and understanding, of some other signifier, some other wish. So in a way, the dream work does the treatment of latent content. It translates it into manifest. Freud's dream interpretation method is almost like the opposite. In fact, it is. It goes in the opposite direction. It tries to undo the dream work to find some possible desires and thoughts underlying that manifest content. So that leads us to our second homework exercise. You've had a dream. What might the dream mean? If we had to, as it were, deconstruct the manifest dream, might there be a wish here? Might there be some substitutions? Might there be some symbolism? That's your homework for this second mini lecture.